What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Planet Soccer Podcast. Today is Saturday, April 15th, and Dylan and I are sad. At the time of recording, both of our Premier League squads just put on abysmal performances that, are causing a lot of drinking today. And I've got stuff.
I'm less sad all of a sudden. That's weird.
Really? Because you watched Tottenham's game, or just because you're drinking?
Half of
both.
Wait, half a dozen, six of the other, or whatever the hell that saying is. That's where I'm at.
Yeah,
that was tough. Yeah, we'll have to, for those of you who are waiting, which I'm sure is very few people, for our Premier League episodes, we did record one this week. We had some technical difficulties.
Which we haven't had in a while, honestly.
Not valid.
We haven't had some technical difficulties in a while.
It is so not valid anymore, though. It is just complete opposite vibes for both of us. So it's just not going to get released. That's going to go into the blooper archives. We'll probably hit you guys with one after tomorrow's couple of games. But it was not a fun morning for either of us. It was a really not fun morning for me. And then Spurs did Spurs things, and I think we're on the same page now.
Yeah, now it's like the day didn't even happen, it feels like. So
yep,
we can just
Well, except Villa's going to catch one of us. So.
Except for Villa. So we're not going to talk about the Premier League today. Man, my eyes are so itchy. I've been working in the garage with my parents trying to clean it out. I just feel like I have so much dust in my eyes. So this one's going to be like halfway closed the whole time probably, but we'll work through it. Today we're going to talk a little U.S. men's national team again. It's been fun talking about the 2026 World Cup and the Gold Cup coming up and just all the things that are going on with the U.S. program. Dylan on par. He's always repping the shirt or hat of whatever we're talking about that day. I need to do a better job of that. But today we're going to take a look at definitely one of the top two most interesting candidates for the USMNT job, I think. Thierry Henry. We're going to kind of dive into him, explain / examine why it would work, why it won't, why it might happen, why it might not, things like that. I think the other interesting one would be Jose Mourinho, which Henry feels more likely than Mourinho does.
Oh, yeah. Certainly.
So, we want to dive into this coaching candidate in particular because he's pretty polarizing in the sense of he had such a great career. So he's like very, very well known. He kind of came to the MLS and wreaked a little bit of havoc. There are some quotes out there where he obviously said things about the league that the league doesn't want to be perceived as, which is fine. I mean, the guy played for Arsenal and Barcelona, and he was just being honest. But alas, there was a Galazzo segment. When was that? Last month, Dylan? Is that when that was? Where he was kind of asked
on it. Yeah, February even maybe, but the last couple months.
He was asked about the U.S. job, and he basically he went around the question a little bit, but basically gave a bunch of qualifiers.
He was pitching himself.
Yeah, a bunch of qualifiers on why he would want the job. So
it was an interview without being an interview.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it was. He was like, "Hey, this is why I am good for this job." And some stuff, we'll get into it as we go.
Why don't you go ahead and start? Go ahead and start talking about him.
So what I was saying was some stuff has come out that has given hope, I guess, to USMNT fans that want him as to why it might happen. In the last, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, he's come out and publicly turned down the French women's team job. And obviously being a Frenchman, that is arguably one of the top maybe 5 jobs he could be given based on his managerial record, because his managerial record, quite frankly, has not been super stellar.
Yeah.
But I will kind of dive in here. I took this off of your shoulders because I know it's probably tougher for you being a Spurs fan, but I'm going to dive into who he is as a player, and then we can.
I'm a respectable journalist. I can put aside my beliefs on an Arsenal player.
Can you? But then afterwards we'll co-op on the dive into his managerial career, and then we'll go into why it might work and why it won't, why it might not work if he were the USMNT manager. But for those of you who have been living under a rock or have just started following the sport in the last 3-5 years, maybe, I'll dive into a little bit of who
If
he
you've
was
been following the sport for
as a player
5
here.
years, surely you know who Thierry Henry
You
is.
should know all of the things I'm going to say to you.
Yeah.
You should know all the things I'm going to say
He's
to
one
you,
of
but
the
I'm going to say
players
it anyways.
1 year in, you
He's
know
a
about
40.
Thierry Henry.
You should. If you've played FIFA, like you've probably gotten roasted by him on Ultimate Team. But he's currently 45 years old. So in managerial realm might be on the slightly younger side still, which might kind of fit into the USMNT side. But he's a 45-year-old Frenchman. He had 2 World Cup. He probably had more than 2 World Cup appearances. But he won it in 98 and was runner-up in, 06. Right? No. Yes. 06 to Italy. Wow, that's bad. We're off to a hot start here. But he's a French international. He's undoubtedly, ask any Arsenal fan or any Premier League fan, the best player to ever wear the Arsenal shirt. Scored 175 goals in 250 games, roughly. He's also not only a goal scorer, he holds the record for the most assists in a single season in the Premier League at Arsenal, I should say, not in the Premier League, at Arsenal. And he also actually led Arsenal to 4 major trophies, where if you are a newer fan, that might seem a bit outlandish. They're not quite Spurs. They can win trophies, but Arsenal hasn't won trophies as of late. So he did win trophies at Arsenal. He was a UCL runner-up at Arsenal and then moved on as well to Barcelona, where he is arguably a part of the best the best Barcelona side in the last trophy-wise in the last 20 some odd years. He won a Champions League there. He won a La Liga there. He won
He was there from 07 to 2010.
Club World Cup there. Yeah, he won every trophy you can think of while at Arsenal, while also still remaining one of, if not the best player in Arsenal's history. So certainly as a player, lots of accolades. Another Monaco youth product. Wasn't there his whole youth career, but moved to Monaco young. We've seen countless number of Monaco youth products, and Monaco will come into our discussion a little bit later on him. But he certainly, moral of the story is, certainly one of the most accomplished players in the last 30 years of the whole world of football. At the end of his career, though, which may be a plus or a bonus for U.S. fans, he did play at Red Bulls for 4 years. New York Red Bulls did play there for I think 4 or 5 years, and certainly that has kind of transitioned him into knowing a bit about the MLS landscape and the U.S. landscape. Play style wise, he was super versatile, as I said. Arsenal's all-time leading single season assist leader, Arsenal's all-time single season goal leader, and I believe the 3rd most goal contributions, sans Holland because he's still going, goal contribution leader in the history of the Premier League. And Premier League's only been around for 30 some odd years now, but certainly one of the best players in Premier League history. If you ask some people, even non-Arsenal fans, they will argue and fight tooth and nail that he is the best Premier League player of all time. And I hear that argument. I don't know if I agree with it. It was before I was watching the Premier League regularly, but I certainly can hear that shout. But his coaching history, as many top players who transitioned to coaching, has been less than stellar at times. So, Reed, I'll kind of let you jump in if you're prepared prepared
Yeah,
to jump into his managerial experience and why it might be a little bit less than desirable when looking at a national team manager.
sure. Um, so Henri's coaching career, albeit pretty short, like you said, has been
Very short.
severely lacking success, especially compared to his playing career. However, he started out back with Arsenal in their youth system, kind of basically getting his licenses, doing that sort of stuff. He began coaching their youth in their youth academy in 2015 in tandem with his work for Sky Sports when he started working with Sky. His first big boy job, if you will, as a manager, not as a manager, but as a coach, was an assistant with Belgium. In 2016, he became the second assistant coach of the Belgian national team, and he worked alongside Roberto Martinez, for better or worse. There's lots of hot takes on Roberto Martinez, but a well-known coach who has been everywhere, it seems. So, and done it on the international. Well, done it might be a little forgiving for Roberto Martinez on the international stage, but he has had success. He, helped. Thierry Henry is said to have helped Romelu Lukaku in kind of his development with the Belgian national team. And he has a really good, this is kind of where his relationship with players and with just being more of a player's coach really came into the forefront on first documentation of that. Players just raving about Henry as a coach. Then he moved to Monaco, and this was his first managerial job, I believe, if my notes are correct.
Yeah.
And it didn't go well. It was greeted with mixed reactions, and it was a pretty big job for him to get. I mean, Monaco at the time, it was 2018. They were on the tail end of their like Mbappe, Silva, all the run with all them, right? Is that
Tielemans.
Yeah, Tielemans.
So he didn't have. I believe he got there after Mbappe.
The sale
but
of all their
Tielemans was still there. He certainly still had a plethora of young talent, especially when you compare it to the French Farmers League, as most of our English listeners and viewers would call it. He certainly had enough talent at Monaco to finish in a comfortable position, not threatened for the league because it is still Monaco, but he certainly had enough talent there to not be bad.
Yeah,
we'll say.
You say not threatened for the league because it was Monaco, but Monaco did actually win the league one of those years with their crop of players, but he didn't have Mbappe. That sale had happened. The coach previously in charge of Monaco actually left the club on bad terms because of the club's transfer policy. Didn't like the fact that they were selling their stars to in league rivals. It's essentially, what would be a good example? Like Leeds selling a generational talent to Man City or to Man United even. That's what Monaco did when they sold Kylian Mbappe to Paris Saint-Germain. Anyways, getting back to his time at Monaco, he was hired because of his experience at Monaco and their youth system. It was kind of a homecoming of sorts. And then also people wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt despite his lack of a resume, because he played with just with Pep Guardiola and under Arsene Wenger. And people really gave a lot of hope to that kind of professionalism and the style of play that he would implement. Go ahead.
It felt like the perfect managerial start, to be honest. Like it felt like it should have been much more successful than it was because of those historical connections he had.
On paper, everything was perfect.
Yeah, he had been there, as you said. He played under Wenger. He played with Pep. Like it felt like the perfect next coach. And Monaco is. Sorry if we have any Monaco listeners. I doubt we do. But Monaco, at its core, is a developmental side. They have a very good academy. They are very rarely going to threaten for the league, especially in today's day and age, based off of their structure and based off of their game plan. But it felt like a guy that would come in and be able to develop their talent and finish top half of the table and get guys to that next level. And that's kind of where we saw him falter. He was manager for, I think he only got 20 matches there.
He got
which
to the January
we'll dive
transfer
into that.
window. Yeah, January transfer window with 4 wins, 5 draws, and 11 defeats. And that's after, I mean, Monaco allowed him to splash some cash on some guys in January. They brought in Fabregas and Ballo-Torre, albeit, you know, not the players they were in their day, but it just, you know, when you're sitting in 19th as Monaco, as the Monaco coach, it is unacceptable considering they are one of the classes of the French league. They're not PSG. Nobody is in that league, but it was unacceptable for a man.
You should be flirting. You should be flirting with Europe every single year with Monaco, and he was flirting closer to Ligue 2. Is that, I don't know how you say two in French, but Ligue 2. We'll go with
it is.
That sounded nice. Ligue 2. He was flirting much closer with that than he was flirting with European competition, and I think some of that was due to the sales that happened before he was there, and I'll jump into that a little bit later when we get into his Montreal.
Let's go ahead and move on to Montreal
coaching stint.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, well, at Montreal, it was somewhat of a, I don't want to say similar because Montreal was, I think, only 3 or 4 years, I believe, removed from being the expansion team in the MLS. But still, it was a team that was newer. It was a team that had very low transfer market value. I know we're transfer market nerds, both of us, and they were third in the whole MLS with like transfer market value. So for lack of a better analogy, let's say they were third best in talent. So both times that he has had a managerial job, it was a spot where the ownership didn't necessarily put him in a place to fully succeed to the best of his ability. Both stints were short. I think total he's managed as a head coach under 50 matches. So the sample size is certainly very small. He wasn't given a lot of leash at either job. Well, he was given leash at Montreal. He did get them. I keep seeing this floated in like articles about him and why Montreal isn't like an indicator. He got them to the playoffs, I believe, for the first time for Montreal. But like it was a weird COVID playoff. Like they finished 9th in the conference. Like it wasn't like he went into Montreal and was a dominant managerial force. He went there, took a team with a very low talent level, and did about what he was expected to do. His points per game that year as manager, I believe, were third lowest as well. He just kind of happened to be in the right conference. But that's where, for me, as we dive into later, the reasons he's I don't necessarily weigh his MLS experience against him negatively is because he was given a side with very little talent. He did exactly what was expected of him with very little talent, and he got them to the playoffs. At Montreal, as I said, he did get them into the playoffs, but he did decide to step down during COVID because of COVID. Obviously, he very intertwined with English football. His family, I believe, still was living in England at the time, decided to step down to spend more time with his family. But from a managerial perspective, at that time, for those of you that don't remember or don't know, Canada was not allowing professional teams to play at home. There was the Blue Jays had to play on the road, the Canadians, the Canucks, the Maple Leafs. Like he had to play almost all of, if not all of his home games in New Jersey as the coach of Montreal. So there is a little bit to be said about what was kind of stacked against him, if you will, in his time at Montreal. He did get the first half of the season, not quite the first half, but he did get some of the games at the beginning of the season at home. But then when COVID hit and when it resumed and they played that play-in tournament or whatever in Florida, he was expected to do a lot while having all of these players away from home, living in hotel rooms, essentially playing away games for the whole second half of his season. So I personally don't hold as much of his track record at Montreal against him. Very low talent level, had to play essentially on the road for a whole season. So I personally don't hold Montreal against him. I think more of the knock against him would be his experience at Monaco.
So basically, what we're saying is his career to this point is basically the list of reasons, basically the list of reasons not to hire him. And I think the list of reasons not to hire him ends at his previous managerial spots. I think those are pretty much the only negatives. You look at basically, he wasn't fired from Montreal, but he left having not maybe succeeded on the level that he personally would have wanted to, or that we would expect the name Thierry Henry to in the sport. After Montreal, he did return to Belgium as an assistant, and then obviously he's been with Golazo for the past 2 years. He's a candidate for the U.S. men's coaching job, I think, because of his name, because he's played in the MLS, and because it would be a name that I think could get a lot of casuals in U.S. soccer more on board. I think recruiting wise, Florian Balogun, it almost seals that deal if it doesn't get sealed without him. And there are several other reasons why Thierry Henry is on this list. And are we ready to go ahead and get into why we think, like, our thoughts on him getting the job? So
why it works? Yeah.
He's essentially, I think Thierry Henry's become my top candidate. And I say that with a little bit of hesitation because of the track record, but then I have to think, all right, we're looking at an international job. He doesn't have to deal with transfer windows. He doesn't have to deal with building a club. He doesn't have to deal with, right now, a sporting director. They're going to hire one. But essentially it's just so different than club ball. I look at it and, the tactical decisions you have to make, they're almost negligible compared to what you have to do on the club level. The talent level is partly the reason for that, but also just because tournament play, there's not as much that you have to maybe account for as you do maybe in a 38 game long season or however long the other leagues are. I think that he is somebody that could get the players excited. He's a winner. And I think it becomes a lot more of the intrinsic value he provides to the program and to the players, to guys like Gio Reyna and Christian Pulisic, who is the U.S.'s left winger, and Thierry Henry. He's known as like a striker because of his ball striking capabilities, but his best position was on the left wing, bar none. That's when he broke the assist record.
Or a striker that or a striker that drifts to the left.
Inverted.
Like, he's certainly a left-sided. He's certainly a left-sided player. And for me, like, when it comes down to the things he could offer as a manager, like, yes, we've touched on as a club manager, as you said, it's less than stellar, it's less than desirable. But one of the things I do really like about him outside of the recruiting is what he can offer to this young roster. Like, we've been talking for
months.
We have only been talking for a year and a half about this, or a year about this probably. But as a whole of U.S. soccer, we've been talking about this for 2 to 4 years. Like, this is our golden generation
to this point.
Right. And what he could offer developmentally to this golden generation. I mean, we've seen the work he did with Lukaku, and it's kind of given him a resurgence of career on the Belgian side and on the club side. And I think that's where he's super attractive to me. Seeing what he could do with the Pulisics, the Reynas, whatever striker we implore, probably Balogun. If Henry comes along, like, it will likely be Balogun.
But even if it is, Pepe, I think Pepe benefits from it.
Every forward 6'5" player every forward 5 or 6 player, depending on the formation you're playing, will benefit from him physically and ability wise. And sure, you can say, well, right now our back four does have some question marks, but if we are going to be a side that pulls off some upsets, and let's be honest, while this is our golden generation, we will have to pull some upsets in 26 and the years before 26 to be a real threat on the world stage. And I think that's where he can really better that side. I think for me, and I hope I'm not jumping the gun and cutting you off on other points here, but for me, the thing that would make me most comfortable with him is knowing or assuming the coaching staff he could bring in around him to work that, tactical standpoint, to work that defensive standpoint, because we know he is coaching wise, believe it or not, based off of his resume, and career wise, one of the most technically sound and technically gifted, mind wise, forward playing players in the history of the game. And right now, that's where all of the plethora of our talent is. So if we're really going to, it is a risk, but if we are really going to take a risk and we really want to hit the semifinals or a nail biter quarterfinal loss in 26, that's where I think he could be one of the, and I 2 months ago when we first started talking about this, both of us were kind of cold on him. But the more I look into him and the more I think about him, the more I'm like, this feels like the perfect risk for us to take. Because if anybody can build a staff to take care of the other half of the field, it's Henry. Like if you're a premier assistant coach, a premier defensive coach,
or if you're a maybe defensive legend that's looking to finally get into coaching, obviously it might not be ideal for us to hire somebody as the center backs coach or, whatever coach that it's his first job. But we're talking like John Terry level players, like guys that are no joke, that respect Thierry Henry, that you could put in and talk to Miles Robinson or, somebody like that. And it would be a legit staff without a doubt.
And at this point, like, it's not what coaching was 20 years ago. And I think that's part of what has held USMNT back. We want this well-rounded coach. We want this US-focused coach. But, like, if we really want to take that next step, let somebody who isn't well-rounded and isn't American build a staff that can do all of those things for you. And any coach on this list, for me, Henry is the one that could build the strongest staff positionally to get the most out of what we have. And I think that's kind of where I'm at right now and where I want to look at this is, yes, Jesse Marsch is attractive. He's American. He plays a very pressing style. He plays a very underdog style. And yes, Jose Mourinho has all of these club qualities. And like there's plenty of other coaches to throw out there. But the staff Henry could bring around him while also bettering the best part of our side right now is what's so attractive about him for me.
Yeah, I also think that if you look at the mindset he would have coming into the USMNT job as like a Tottenham fan, with say like an Antonio Conte, I knew that he was never going to commit to the side, and like that was a negative for me. And I know Thierry Henry won't commit to the US long term, but I don't care. Like I know that this is a stepping stone for him to get back into club coaching. And I'm fine with that because he knows that he has to do well in his next role to get back into the Bundesliga or the French league or whatever. Go ahead.
And that's not where Spurs should have been in their hire.
Yeah.
Spurs should have been looking for somebody to commit fully. But that's like, if we're being honest, that's exactly where USMNT has to be. I don't need this guy who bleeds red, white, and blue right now. I need the guy who can get the most out of what we have before we let this golden generation pass us. And a guy
that brings more respect to the sport and the country, and Thierry Henry being the figurehead. I mean, one of the best sports pundit of any sport in the world right now is Thierry Henry, in my opinion. Put together with the guys on that desk and with Kate Abdo, I mean, they're so good. We talk about it all the time. Thierry Henry's more soft spoken. He's not as outgoing, but the stuff he says is the stuff that matters in their show. And you can just tell he has a manager's mind. And we talk about all the time how a lot of top players don't become top coaches, but that's more often than not on the club scene. And I just think that taking into consideration the lack of tactical changes, tactical considerations you have to think about in the international game compared to the club game, I think it really works with Thierry Henry. And I think he can do well enough at the U.S. to fool another club or another club into hiring him because of the success he has with the U.S. And that's not a knock on him. That's just, it's different. It's a different game, you know?
No, absolutely. And the other thing I really like about him is, you referenced it in our little intro, if you will. He seemed just like we hyped Jesse Marsh up for this leading up to the World, or in the World Cup, even, I believe. He was interviewed asking, what he would do with this USMNT side. And we loved that about him. Yeah. And it was very tactical, which is exciting. And I like to hear that.
More philosophical than tactical, I think.
Henry or Marsh?
Both. I mean, they didn't talk like X's and O's, but it was like
Marsh to me was more tactical in his explanation of what he would do, yeah. And that's where it's almost in favor of, for me, in favor of Henry. Like, USMNT does need to almost tear it down. Like, we are not even close as an organization to these European sides or these South American sides that we want to compete with. We almost have to, like he mentioned in that interview you talked about, the effort South Korea made in 2002 to shut down the league for 8 months. League. And Henry said, we're not like he said, I wouldn't want to shut down the MLS
because I wouldn't have any players from the MLS on my roster.
But he said, those are the things I'm like thinking about, that if you are a side like the US as a host, as a middle 20, if you will, side internationally, you're not a top 10 side. The US is still far from that. As much as I hate to say it, we are still far from a top 10 side as a program, as a roster. You have to look outside the box. You have to think more uniquely. And that's what he's ready to do. And that's just what we have never seen from the USMNT. We've never seen them hire somebody who was kind of outside the box, thinking creatively. We've seen Berhalter
and in the box
countless
coaches.
Guys before him that are very US focused, MLS focused. And Henry's like, no. I'm not going to shut down the MLS, but like, I'm going to think a little outside the box here. And like, that's what excites me about him is in that interview. Highly recommend people watch it. Maybe we'll even link the Golasso channel in our description here. I'll say this. We will link that Golasso interview, if you will, in the description here. But he was talking about things that he wants to, or he would like to see the U.S. do differently than they're already doing.
You can tell it wasn't the first time he had thought about it also, which is the exciting.
Exactly. And that's what's telling. And in the same interview, he said, I don't want to be the number 2. He wants to be the number 1. He has turned down the French women's job. Like, where else? Like, he's a guy, you offer it to him, he's there tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And like, I want that. Like, yes, the Jose Mourinhos of the world, albeit with zero international experience, are exciting because they have that name cachet. But man, I want somebody who wants to be here and wants to disrupt what's been going wrong for the past, I don't know, X number of years.
Yeah.
And we've both been on record of saying there's been a lot that's gone wrong the last X number of years with the U.S. Federation.
Yeah, I think you mentioned tearing it down for the U.S. I know what you meant, and I don't know if I just want to clarify. I don't think tearing it down was the right maybe phrase for it. We want to just change completely the philosophy of the U.S. organization, yes. Because exactly. We're no longer on that Costa Rica level, that mid-tier level. Like, we do have top 20, borderline top 15 talent. So you need to take it from Absolutely. The Greg Berhalter mindset to the Thierry Henry mindset, maybe in order to get to like a Jose Mourinho type of coach that will come in and actually win or get you to a World Cup final or whatever final else the U.S. plays in Ireland, a Gold Cup. The U.S. basically won everything else they play in the last go around with Berhalter, but
Right.
the only thing that matters is the World Cup. And I think Thierry Henry offers the ability to change the philosophy, change the mindset, just the vibe also around the U.S. camp. He's turned down Bournemouth, he's turned down Bordeaux, but said he does want to get back into coaching. It does feel at this point as though he's finishing out the Champions League with Collazo, doing his media pundency to stuff, and then come June, July, which is the timeline that the U.S. camp has given us, that's when a coaching changes or a coaching decision is going to happen. And I think his timeline just lines up with ours.
Yeah, I don't want to be dramatic, but like it feels like such a nice match. Like it really does, because of all of the things we said. I firmly believe for us American people who consume all of their soccer in either the Premier League or Ted Lasso, I firmly believe he will hire a Nathan Shelley for you Ted Lasso folks, who will be that technical genius when needed, but he also has that cachet to shut Nathan Shelley the hell up and be like, no, this is my ship, but we'll take that stuff tactically when needed in a round of 16 when it's like, oh, all right, we got to get a little bit more creative, or in those big matches where it's like, all right, I've built such a strong side. I can't believe oh my God, this is terrible. I can't believe I'm comparing this to an Apple TV show, but I built such a strong side like Ted Lasso. But like now it's time to get a little technically different. I believe in him and bringing those people on. And I think everything before that is required is the perfect fit for Henry. And he will completely build the players individually and chemistry wise. And as you said, vibe wise, he'll build that perfectly to a point where he can allow a tactical genius who is relatively unknown right now to help out the side as needed. The other thing with him is he does have international experience. Granted, Belgium was very disappointing in this last World Cup, but he has seen a Belgian side to a World Cup semifinal. The semifinal that they did make was a semifinal they absolutely should have made based on talent, but that does give me some comfort that he has had that experience of that international competition, where some of the other guys like Vieira, who has become a very hot name, and I like Vieira. I love Patrick Vieira. I've been a huge Palace fan because of Vieira. Does not have, or Curtin or in Philadelphia, or Mourinho in Roma, or Zidane, for all of you that think Zidane is still a possibility, which newsflash, he's not. At least Henry has some of that international experience. And I do think that is extremely important, because it is very different having that experience of managing players internationally, with whether it's trying to get them to the right club to succeed, which at times we haven't seen with the US. Pepe, I don't necessarily think went to the best European side for himself to develop initially, going to Augsburg. Like, we've seen him have a lot more success in the Dutch league. And I think that's something that Henry would be very good at, where some of those other managers that are being floated around, you could even throw Jesse Marsch. Yes, I know he was there in 2010 when the U.S. was in South Africa, but like he was there for 8 months. Like, I don't know if I really qualify that the same as Henry. So Henry has a lot of things. He has the ability to coach our front five, which is the plethora of talent for us. He also has the ability to recruit. He also has the ability to reverse recruit. I don't even know if that's the right terminology, but get the U.S. international players to the right European sides.
Oh, okay.
No. Just get the current players to the right side to succeed, to better their career and better their talents. That's something I would 100% trust Henry more than anybody else on this short list, if you will.
So, last 2 points of this episode, and they're the ones that I've been saving until the end and really been itching to say. If the U.S. is playing in a quarterfinal and this game is tied, say it's the 80th minute or whatever, and Thierry Henry's on the sideline or on the touchline, he's going to bring in a sub. Or say any manager's on the touchline needs to bring in a sub to score a goal to win this quarterfinal to send the U.S. to the semifinal of the 2026 World Cup. Who do you want as a manager to pat this sub on the chest and say, you're going to go score a goal and win this game for us? Who better than fucking Thierry Henry to pat Gio Reyna, or he'd probably already be on the field, but whoever on the chest and say,
yeah, I mean, say Gio Reyna's not starting.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And the second thing is you look at where the U.S. is. We say this is their golden generation, and it is, but I definitely have to say up to this point, because soccer's growing so quickly in this country that this won't even be close to the best team that we have in our lifetime, I think.
Agreed. I hope.
Yeah, I hope. You bring Thierry Henry, and those 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, they're going to get to interact with him at least a little bit. That's such an inspiring thing, for a kid that knows the history of the sport, because I know, I look at some of the kids that I played soccer with growing up who were really into the sport, and they felt a little ostracized because it was such not a popular sport in the country. And they're very knowledgeable, though. They know the history. They really value the history. So these kids know Thierry Henry and the legend that he is, and how valuable that would be for him to, come to the table and say, look, we're going to turn this thing around, and by 2040, whatever, you're going to be the striker for the U.S. men's national team, and you're going to go out and score 10 goals in the World Cup and take the U.S. to the final or whatever. So I think a lot of the off the field stuff is what excites me about Henry more so than the on the field stuff. But again, in the international game, the on the field stuff just doesn't matter as much. Don't get me wrong. It does. You got to make a sub when you need to make a sub and all that.
I fully agree.
It's way more philosophical and just the mindset you have as a country and as a squad as a whole than it is, okay, we're going to line up against this team this week in this formation, and next week when we're, trying to go top 4, we're going to line up this in this formation. It's not that in the international game. There's nothing to really look ahead to other than that game. So, yeah. You got anything else on Henry? I think it's a good fit.
But before we end, I'm going to play devil's advocate really fast. Okay. We touched on just his managerial record, why it wouldn't work. And as I said, he's coached less than 50 games. His win percentage was under 30%. Those are the obvious. The only other slight concern I have is there is a very clear record of him when he was playing in the MLS, and less so, but still some of a record of him doing it as an MLS coach, where he might be too good, or might have been too good of a player to coach in America. Because it was very known when he was at Red Bull, it was like, why aren't you doing this simple thing?
I think the talent level's different now. I think the talent level's different.
It likely is. It likely is. And the talent keeps getting better and better. So it likely would be a little bit better than it would have been in 2012 when he was playing in the MLS. But that is my one concern is, can he handle the non-starting 11 guys making mistakes in Nicaragua and a, qualification match when they get subbed on up 3-1, or hopefully up 3-1, and somebody lets in a silly goal with a complete brain fart on a run. Like, that's the only other thing I do somewhat worry about was he too good of a player to relate to some of the USMNT players. Yeah. And that's just a devil's advocate. I'm not saying that is an actual concern of mine. I still think it is something he would work through very, very successfully. And I still would feel very comfortable with him, but trying to be as objective as possible. That is another concern I have of him being the USMNT coach, is will he not be able to connect with some of that guy that's the 20th man on the roster who does have brain farts because he's the 20th best player in the U.S. And we're still the U.S. We're still in that 10 to 15 range of talent. Is that something he can, learn to be a very good coach with? But that's honestly the only other concern I have. More so, I have more of a concern with that than his managerial record, because we've stated multiple times club coaching is extremely different than international coaching. So for me, the biggest concern is, would Henry, because he was such a world-class player, not be able to relate as well to some of our lesser USMNT players?
Maybe we'll find out. Maybe we'll be hired, or maybe he'll be hired and we'll find out. I feel like I've convinced Dylan that Thierry Henry is the number one candidate for the U.S. coaching job through this episode, the 45
highest
minutes
risk,
of episode.
highest reward. Well, not highest risk. One of the highest risks.
I think the highest ceiling without it. I think the highest ceiling for sure.
Yes.
And
yes.
Maybe not the lowest floor, but probably a floor in line with most others. Definitely in line with Berhalter's. The team could potentially knock it out of the group any given year in the World Cup. So if you make the tournament, then
not with a real striker, and I think it is default that with Henry we get a real striker.
Yeah.
So I do think Henry's floor is higher than some of these MLS guys we're talking about.
Let us know what y'all think in the comments. As always, I feel like our discussions about the USMNT it's gotten us like thousands of natural views, which is kind of crazy, and some pretty nasty comments about our
real
opinions.
Comments. Yeah.
But
the Star Wars Satan or whatever he is.
Yeah.
Drop it in the comments on why you don't want Henry either. Please do.
But nonetheless, leave your comments. Make sure to subscribe if you're not already. Like, duet, stitch, all that on TikTok. Maybe we'll clip some stuff out of here. I need to teach Dylan how to edit, so one of us can edit for TikTok and one can do it for YouTube. We will talk to y'all next time. Appreciate y'all watching.